A large circular disk of mass m and radius r is initially stationary on a horizontal icy surface. A person of mass m over 2 stands on the edge of the disk. Without slipping on the disk, the person throws a large stone of mass m over 20 horizontally at initial speed v0 from a height h above the ice in a radial direction as shown in the figure above. The coefficient of friction between the disk and the ice is mu. All velocities are measured relative to the ground. The time it takes to throw the stone is negligible. And then, this is really crucial, express all algebraic answers in terms of m, r, v0, h, mu, and fundamental constants as appropriate, meaning no other symbol should show up except these things, and maybe, in this case, they mean g, which isn't really fundamental, but they use it that way. All right, part A. Derive an expression for the length of time it takes the stone to strike the ice. So, as usual, let's draw a little picture. Here's the stone. It's thrown with some initial velocity v0, some height above the ground, and then, of course, it tracks out some arc. And all they really want is they want you to say the original time was t equals 0. The final time is t equals tf. We know that only the vertical motion matters. The horizontal motion is irrelevant in this case. So we can say something like y equals y0 plus v0y times t plus 1/2 the acceleration, the y, times t squared. But we know some of these values. We're going to start at value h. We're going to end at value 0. So I'm taking my coordinate frame to be this one. We have no initial velocity in the y. We're ending at time tf. Sorry. Let's do it this way. No velocity in the y. And we know that our acceleration is g, but it's downward. So that means our equation actually becomes 0 is, well, actually, let's leave out the 0 one for the moment. Not have undone that, because I want things that are true always. So I end up with the equation that y is h minus 1/2 g t squared for any time from the moment after I threw it to the moment it hits the ground. Of course, at the moment it hits the ground, we know that the height is 0 and the time is tf. So we really have this, which we can solve pretty easily to get a result that is hopefully kind of standard at this point, 2h over g, but square rooted. Part B. Assuming that the disk is free to slide on the ice, derive an expression for the speed of the disk and person immediately after the stone is thrown. So, a couple things. Why this particular thing? Because we don't want any forces during the throw. All right. If there were friction, in principle, we might have to include the fact that the friction could deliver an impulse and therefore change the momentum state. But because the disk is free to slide, the momentum state is not going to be changed, at least if we take as our momentum cases. Here's the disk and person and stone. And then afterward, here's the disk and person and stone. The stone is moving over with speed v0, and we want to know what is our speed, which I'm just going to call, since they don't give us one, I'm just going to call it v1. And what we know, of course, are the masses. We know that the person is m over 2, and the disk is mass m, and the ball is of mass m over 20. And in between, we don't really care what happens. All we know is the forces are internal. The person pushes on the stone pushes back on the person is pushed against the disk, which then pushes back, etc. We don't care for all of that. They just tell us that the two things move together, the person and the disk move together, and the stone moves off. So we are going to say, with no external forces, that P initial is P final. Or 0 is, and then our initial mass is the person's mass plus the disk's mass times the speed or the velocity of the person, which is minus v1. And then we're going to add in the mass over 20 times the speed of the disk, which was v0. So let's try and solve this for v1. We get 3/2 the mass times v1 equals the mass over 20 times v0. So v1 is going to be, cancel the m's, and we have 2/3 of 20, 2/3 of 1/20th, I'm sorry, times v0, which is 1/30th of v0. There's a note in the rubric that the way you solve this, if you had not included this minus sign here, then it would have shown up here, and they say that that's okay. I think that's a little risky, so if you were to get a negative, you should say, but I need a speed, and at least force it positive, and don't assume that they're going to be generous and do that for you. Part C, derive an expression for the time it will take for the disk to stop sliding. So now we're just talking about the disk. So we have, notation's going to be a little annoying, but it's okay. The disk sliding, and it's been given the kick we just gave it, v1 this way, but eventually it comes to rest. And what we want is the time. So again, if this is t equals 0, we would like to know when it is at rest, what is the time, which I'm going to call time t1, which probably isn't the same as the tf before, so I shouldn't use tf again. So we'll say t1, time for it to stop moving. And during this time, if it's sliding across ground that has some friction characterized by mu. And they don't say it, but they mean obviously kinetic friction because the thing's actually sliding. So let's draw a free body diagram. Our free body diagram would have the weight of the block pulling down on it and the normal force from the floor. And there's sort of this other weird thing. Should we talk about the block and the block in person? And we know it doesn't really matter since they're sliding as one unit, so I'm just going to call it mass 3/2 m. We know that it suffers a frictional force pointing this way and undergoes an acceleration pointing that way, which I'm going to call A1. And we know that we can find the size of A1 by the second law. So we're going to say that F net equals ma, let's say in the x direction for both. The net force is, of course, just the frictional force. And then the mass here is 3/2 m, let's say, times the acceleration that we're looking for. Oh, but that's sad because I don't have the frictional force. So I'm going to say I also know that the frictional force is mu times the normal force. And I know that the net force in the y is going to be m times a in the y. The net force in the y is the normal force minus the weight. And there is no acceleration vertically. So the normal force is the weight, which is 3/2 m times g. So we can go back up here and we can say the frictional force is mu times 3m over 2 times g. Putting all of that together in a sort of awkwardly spaced thing, I take this equation and I say that mu times 3/2 m times g equals 3/2 m times a1, or a1 is mu times g, which in all honesty is a result that I remember. Actually, I've come across this so many times, and you might too, but you should probably still derive. All right, then it becomes relatively easy because we can say, well, the velocity at any time is the initial velocity, let's call it just the initial velocity plus the acceleration times the time. So we're going to end at 0. We're going to have started at 1/30th v0. Our acceleration is minus mu g y minus, because here I'm taking my velocity as positive, so the acceleration has to be negative, times, of course, t1, the time I was looking for. So t1 ends up being something like v0 over 30 mu g. All right, part D. The person now stands on a similar disk of mass m and radius r that has a fixed pole through its center, so it can only rotate on the ice, not slide. The person throws the same stone horizontally in a tangential direction at speed v0 as shown in the figure above. The rotational inertia of the disk is given as mr squared over 2. Part D says, derive an expression for the angular speed omega of the disk. And what we're going to say here is that there are no external torques on this system if the system consists of the person and the disk and the stone. Then the only forces acting, the only torques are acting, are the ones that come from the person pushing the stone and the stone pushing back. So in that case, we can say that the initial angular momentum is the final angular momentum. The initial angular momentum, of course, was 0, nothing spinning. The final angular momentum is going to be a little bit more interesting. If we throw the stone in the direction shown forward, then it's going to push back on the person backward, and then their friction with the disk is going to cause it to rotate, and it's going to spin clockwise. So after we have the disk, we have the stone moving forward, and we have the disk rotating backward. Now remember, we know that the stone's speed is v0. I'm going to call the initial speed backward omega 0 to compensate. After we throw this, we have mp of the stone. Actually, I guess m over 20 times p of the, sorry, should do that. We have the radius of the thing times the momentum of the stone, because it has a line of action like that, and when first thrown, we're going to have, that's going to be the distance it's at, which is r. That's the perpendicular distance to the line of action. So that's its angular momentum. And we also know, color cleaning, oops, that we have the angular momentum of the disk and person, which is going to be I total times omega. And then we need to be really careful, because one of these is in the opposite direction as the other. We traditionally take counterclockwise as positive, so I'll stick with that. So I actually have minus I omega here, I omega naught. Oh, sorry, they gave us what it should be, so it's I omega. And I should also clean this up. All right. So in one sense, it's pretty easy. Just solve this for omega. Omega is Rp over I total. The problem is that none of these are the correct symbols except the R, I suppose. So I have to start putting in what things are. Well, the radius is still the radius. The momentum is going to be the mass, which is m over 20, times the speed, which is v0. And then the inertia is going to be the 1/2 mr square from the disk, but also the person's m over 2 times r square for being a point person, being a point object. So it actually doesn't care of which of these, but I need both the disk and the person. Hey, notice how they've managed to magically rig it that they have the same, so it doesn't matter which of those is which. But all right, theoretically, you could probably just stop there. That is an answer in terms of only things that were given, but we probably should process it further to see what comes out. So we get mv0r over 20, that's the top bit, and at the bottom we just get mr square. So we get something like v0 over 20r. All right, and we have that the person now stands on the disk at rest r over 2 from the center of the disk. The person now throws the stone horizontally with the speed v0 in the same direction as in part D. Is the angular speed of the disk immediately after throwing the stone from this new position greater than, less than, or equal to the angular speed found in part D? Well, let's see. Throwing this at half the radius means that the initial angular momentum given to the stone is half as large, which means the initial angular momentum given to the disk plus person is also half as large. So that would seem to imply that we get half the angular momentum, and therefore half the angular velocity. But we need to be careful because the person is also closer in, so the rotational inertia of the disk is also less. So which of those effects wins out? And we are pretty clear that we can actually just look at it. The initial rotational inertia had been mr squared. The new rotational inertia is the 1/2 mr squared for the disk, plus now it's the person is m/2, and the radius is now halved and squared. So we have 1/2 mr squared plus 1/8 mr squared. So that's 5/8 mr squared, which is 5/8 of the original thing. So we've decreased the inertia by more than we've decreased the initial angular momentum. If we look at it here, we could say that the angular momentum of the disk equals the angular momentum of the stone. So I omega of the disk is m/2 times v0 times r/2. We've reduced this by a factor of 2. We've reduced this by a factor of more than 2. So this is reduced. This must be reduced as well. So it is less than. We could just run the calculation again directly to prove this. We have no momentum at the start still. And then we have the reduced radius times the same momentum, which is m/20 times v0. And then we have, of course, a minus sign because they're going other directions. And then I omega, but we just found that I is 5/8 mr squared times the new omega. So 5/8 mr squared times the new omega is mv0r/40. So omega star is going to be 8/5 of 1/40 v0, which is v0/25. Oh, and there's an r lying around here, so let's bring that. And of course, 1/25 is less than 1/20, so omega is smaller.